Okay. Chapter 20 is a short chapter, so we'll cover 20 and 21. Next week, Connor is going to go for a month, and he'll begin with chapter 22 and go for a while on that. So that'll be good. Let's see. Let me just read chapter 20. It's a short chapter, so let me just read it, and then we'll talk about it. In the year that the commander-in-chief, who was sent by Sargon, the king of Assyria, came to Ashdod and fought against it and captured it. At that time the Lord spoke by Isaiah the son of Amoz, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from your waist, and take off your sandals from your feet. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. Then the Lord said to my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Cush. So shall the king of Syria lead away the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of Egypt. Then they shall be dismayed and ashamed because of Cush, their hope, and Egypt, their boast. And the inhabitants of this coastland will say in that day, Behold, this is what has happened to those in whom we hoped for, and to whom we fled for help, to be delivered from the king of Assyria. And we, how shall we escape? So, verse 1. Let me see here. The 5 cities of the Philistines, which Ashdod is one, the 5 cities are Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. And they are mainly on the Mediterranean coast, with Ashdod being about 3 miles away from the coast, inland, about 33 miles from Jerusalem, west of Jerusalem. So Ashdod, this city, falls to Assyria. I suspect this is what it's talking about, to King Sargon of Assyria in 711 BC. So this is a fact. It fell with that Assyrian invasion of Israel, of those northern tribes. So, this is a fact. In verses 2 and 3, Isaiah acts out a prophetic sign against Egypt and Cush. We talked about them last time. We talked about the all Ethiopians just in general. The commentators had different opinions. Was Isaiah totally naked walking around, or did he simply sort of take his clothes off? And, that. I guess, who knows? But this is a prophetic dumb show. When the prophets do crazy play acts to make a prophetic statement. The greatest, I think, of these prophetic dumb shows is Ezekiel, who does several of these. Jeremiah does some of these too, in a certain way. Like take a loincloth and go up to the Euphrates and bury it in the bank of a river. And then he goes back in 3 years and moves run. And God's making a big point about these apparently bizarre actions. This is the only one of these kind of prophetic pantomimes that I think that Isaiah made, or at least it's recorded. This maybe I could be corrected here, but I think this is the only one who only time he did. So, Isaiah's walking around for 3 years without his clothes on. Why? It's a prophetic sign against Egypt and Cush, that just as Isaiah is walking around that way, so Egypt and Cush are going to be taken into captivity naked. That's it. That's the prophecy. And sure enough, it comes to pass. And verse 4, I believe we're okay to talk about that. Verses 5 and 6, and the point, verses 5 and 6, then they shall be dismayed and ashamed because of Cush, their hope, and Egypt, their boast. He's talking about the Jews. I suspect in both Israel and Judah both, they're always trying to make political, well, not always. Some of the kings of Judah or try to make political alliances with Egypt or with Assyria or with some other power to protect them from attack by another power. And Isaiah is he's just always against this. He says, no, I mean, you should trust in God. Don't trust in Egypt, because guess what? Egypt is going down. Right? And so, in that day, when all this comes to pass, then they shall be dismayed and ashamed, because of Cush their hope and of Egypt their boast. And the inhabitants of this coastland will say in that day, and that would be up in Israel and so forth, and the Philistine cities, behold, this is what happened to those in whom we hoped, and to whom we fled for help, to be delivered from the king of Assyria, and how should we escape? So Isaiah really repeats this message over and over. Don't try to use secular powers to deliver you from disaster to come, because these secular powers are going down too. So then he prophesies that these inhabitants will say, well, look what happened to the powers in whom we trusted. I mean, they've been flattened too. So Isaiah's prophecy for Israel and for Judah too is, don't make alliances or hope in these foreign powers. You need to hope in Yahweh. He is the one who can deliver you. Okay, I think that's all I have on chapter 20, but I'm open to comments.
Question, just a question more than this prophecy. I was thinking about just a phrase out of the verse in Revelation chapter 3, that thou mayest be clothed with the shame of thy nakedness did not appear. You know, that white robe he uses. So somehow that just came to mind while you were reading through that. And but our hope would be in Christ to do that, not the secular world.
Yeah, well, indeed. All right, who else?
This, just a kind of a practical question. This was a sign against Ethiopia. Isaiah is not living anywhere near Ethiopia. So how would they have seen this sign?
Remember, we said last time that Egypt controlled its own destiny for a long time, but sometimes they were conquered by foreign powers.
Sure.
And at one time, I didn't know this, they were actually conquered by Ethiopia. And they had an Ethiopian king sitting on the throne of Egypt. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, it's all mixed up there.
Yeah,
Egypt
that's what it
and
sounds like.
Ethiopia.
It sounds like the borders between the nations are getting a little fuzzy, is what it sounds
Well,
like.
they were always fuzzy, but I mean, well, even today, I mean, if you go south from Egypt, I think you get to Sudan first, and if you keep going south, you get into Ethiopia, so it's a fair distance south there.
It seems like it's a sign against Ethiopia and Egypt, but the message is to Israel and Judah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So this offense of walking around naked, no matter how naked he was a mirror. I'm a mirror of Ethiopia and Egypt. They're
That's
going to
right.
be walking around
Showing
naked.
how they are.
They're going to be put to shame. So
Exactly.
why put your trust in them?
Exactly. That's exactly what's going on. All right, well, we'll go to chapter 21, and I'm going to let some people help me with some, looking up some passages here. Greg, if you want to look at Amos, the book of Amos, chapter 5, verses 18 through 20. And, let's see. Craig, Daniel 5, 1 through 5. And Jim, Genesis 19:14. And then we'll do some other stuff after that. Okay. All right, chapter 21. The oracle concerning the wilderness of the sea. As the whirlwinds in the Negev sweep on, it comes from the wilderness, from a terrible land. A stern vision is told to me, the traitor betrays, and the destroyer destroys. Go up, O Elam, lay siege, O Media. All the sighing she has caused I will bring to an end. Therefore my loins are filled with anguish, pains have seized me. Like the pangs of a woman in labor, I bow down so that I cannot hear. I am dismayed, so that I cannot see. My heart staggers. Horror has appalled me. The twilight I long for has been turned for me into trembling. Okay, we'll stop there. The oracle of the sea. The oracle concerning the wilderness of the sea it is. The southern region of Mesopotamia was known as the sea land, the wilderness of the sea. So that perhaps is what's being talked about here. This is a vision of Isaiah while in the midst of a terrifying storm coming up from the south, from the Negev. So he's getting all this wind and rain, and he's prophesying about Mesopotamia up there. It's, you know, all a real prophetic picture and all that. Okay, verse 2, Elam and Media. Elam and Media should get ready to perform their appointed work. Elam is southern Iran or Persia. Let's just use a lot of scripture, Elam. And the Media is in more or less north-central Iran. So this is Iran or Persia, the Medes and the Persians. That's what we're talking about here. And so they are going to go down and destroy. And indeed, the Medes and the Persians did go down to Babylon and destroy it in 539 BC. So the Babylonian Empire was over, and the Medes and the Persians took over, right? So, this is prophecy here. So Isaiah is looking out into the future. I can't give you a number. This is a couple hundred years here, some such, 150, couple hundred years maybe, out in the future. And Isaiah said, well, he's a prophet, so that's what he's doing. The Medes and the Persians are going to come down, says Isaiah in verse 2. And in verses 3 and 4, we have, I think, a prophetic identification with the suffering of humanity. Now, Babylon took Judah into captivity, right? They weren't nice guys. But now the prophet sees the destruction of Babylon, and he's moved about it. So as Babylon is overthrown, we have the death of families, we have the death of small children, and so forth. And Isaiah sees this, and he's sorry about it. He's identifying with these people. Do I identify with all the death and destruction that's going on in the world, particularly in the Ukraine? No. Why? Well, I'm not a prophet, for one thing. I don't have the compassion that Christ has, for another thing. So, here we are.
Maybe that was one of the examples. He was called the weeping prophet.
A what?
The weeping
Yeah.
prophet.
Yeah.
He was weeping for them.
It's suffering, man. It's suffering humanity here. And the prophet's torn up about it. Everybody's with me? Okay. Well, we read verses 3 and 4. It seems that he is prophesying out to that event of the destruction in Babylon. Look at verse 5 then. Let me read what I have in 3 and 4. So, prophetic identification with suffering humanity, in this case Babylon, which was no friend of Israel. Nevertheless, as Babylon is overthrown, we have the death of families, little children, and so on a large scale, probably. Isaiah sees this. Amos has some of the same characteristics. Who had Amos 5, 18 through 20? Greg?
Yeah.
Book of Amos.
Amos 5:18 to 20.
Yes.
Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. As if a man did flee from a lion and a bear met him, or went into the house and leaned his hand on the wall and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light? Even very dark and no brightness in it.
Wow. So I guess Amos is saying, do we read that? Well.
Some people.
These are prophets. Okay. Verse 5 then. Look at verse 5 now. If Isaiah is prophesying out in the future about the Babylonian captivity and the fall of Babylon. Eventually, verse 5, he says, they prepare the table, they spread the rug, they eat, they drink. Arise, O princes, oil the shield. What does that sound like to you, that verse there in Scripture?
Get ready to fight.
Yes, but what historical event? Fred,
A Eucharistic event?
no. Well,
Set a table, eat and drink?
an unholy
What is
Eucharist.
the watchtower and anoint the shield? Or
Yeah.
Is that oil the shield?
Yes,
Princes who captain the
princes. Yes,
regiments.
princes all meet together. Nick,
I'm just thinking in the context, the fall of Babylon, maybe even the fall of Jerusalem, but the fall of Babylon, I mean, this is the night before the battle.
okay, so tell me. So what happened then?
In regards to just,
In Babylon, what was going on at that time?
I don't know.
At last, the pastor doesn't know.
Are you thinking the Tower of Babel?
You're getting warm. Connor, what was happening? Right before destruction came in.
They were eating and drinking and giving.
Yes.
Oh, it's before the flood.
Belshazzar's feast was happening. The night before destruction came upon them. And most of the commentators, say, well, this seems to be what's being talked about here. So, if we wanted to read a little bit about that, who had Belshazzar's feast? Daniel 5, 1 through 5.
That was
Greg, you should have had the answer, man.
Well, I haven't read it. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple, which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. In the same hour the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote.
Yeah, it goes on. Yeah.
You want me to go on?
What verse you
That was 5.
Yeah, go ahead and read a couple more verses.
Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck. He shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. All the king's wise men came, but they could not read writing or make known to the king's interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled. His countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom to whom the Spirit of the Holy God, in whom is the Spirit of the Holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation.
Go ahead, keep reading.
Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men and the astrologers who have brought in before me, they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not give the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of you, and you have, that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up, and whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven. Till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, and wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand, and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand was sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written: Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck, made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. This is part one. That very night Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom.
There you go.
Being about 62 years old.
There you go. So that's the last night of Babylon, as it were. They were feasting and drinking and so forth. And then in this verse here, in verse 5 in Isaiah, he's the last verse, the last line, he says, "Arise, O princess, oil the shield," which these leather shields, I mean, they would put oil on that, so sword blows would typically glance off. So what he's saying is, arise, prepare for battle, but it's way too late. It's all over. It's all over by then. So, okay, so that's prophecy right there in verse 5. Okay, let me read another comment by a commentator that I have. This is John Oswald. He says, this verse accords very well with the report of Belshazzar's fall in Daniel 5. At the moment when the king and his nobles are feasting and unconcerned, the enemy troops are surrounding the city. Suddenly, in the midst of the feast, the call to arms is sounded, but it is already too late. This is always the story of judgment. One of sin's functions is to deaden moral sensitivities until the possibility of retribution becomes unthinkable. There's no hope. So it was at Sodom, and so it will be on the last day. So someone has Genesis 19:14, Jim and Connor. If you could look at Mark chapter 13, verses 35 and 36. As it was in the beginning, it is now and ever shall be. The world without end, amen. Okay. Jim, 1914.
Yes. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law.
Yeah. So Lot's sons-in-law thought it was just a joke. I mean, it was, his life is normal. And Lot goes on and gets out, with his daughters, but the sons-in-law stay, and obviously destruction comes upon him. It's too late. I mean, destruction's right at the door. And so it will be on the last day. Mark chapter 13, verses 35 and 36. All right.
Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep.
So it's too late. I mean, when we're asleep, when Christ comes, it's too late to be converted. We're thinking about it, just a little more. I just need a little more time to work it out. That's too late. Christ comes.
Just comes a thief in the night.
He comes. Yeah. So be awake, says God. All right. Verse 6. For thus the Lord said to me, go set a watchman, let him announce what he sees. So this could go with verse 5, referring to the pool of preparation in Babylon. They're more interested in revelry than anything else, as evidenced by oil and shields, but it's too late. But more likely it goes with the following verses, sort of the watchman on the wall here. So verses 7 through 10. This is what the watchman then announces. When he sees riders, horsemen in pairs, riders on donkeys, riders on camels, let him listen diligently. Then he who saw cried out, upon a watchtower I stand, O Lord, continually by day, and at my post I am stationed whole nights. And behold, here come riders, horsemen in pairs. And he answered, fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the carved images of her gods he is shattered to the ground. Okay, so 7 through 9 and 10 here. I'll read 10 in a minute. Horsemen in pairs in verse 7 probably refers to a vision of the Persian army coming down, who like to advance in pairs. They like to run their horses and donkeys in pairs as the armies are coming down. Could be that. Verse 8. Upon a watchtower I stand, O Lord, continually by day, and I am at my post, stationed whole nights. So the watchman is being faithful here. Night, day, he's at his post, nothing's happening. Finally something happens. Babylon has fallen, that's what happens. So the watchman waits a long time for this announcement that Babylon has fallen, just as the church continues to wait for that announcement. So, verses 9 and 10. Verse 10, O my friend, and winnowed one, what I have heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I announce to you. I think this is probably Israel here, who's been winnowed by the Lord a long time, and had various chastenings applied to them. So, eventually the watchman announces to Israel that their trouble, at least from Babylon, is over, because Babylon is fallen. Therefore, in a certain sense, the watchman still waits for the fall of Babylon, which is the world system. As we know very well from the book of Revelation, John is all over that in the book of Revelation. So let's read chapter 18 in the book of Revelation about the fall of Babylon. So these things continue to play out just as Babylon fell, for sure.
You say Revelation 18?
It's 18. So Babylon will fall, for sure. It's a long chapter that I'm going to read. This also is prophecy. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. I mean, it's a repeat almost from Isaiah here. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her. And the merchants of the earth became rich from the power of her luxurious living. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back, as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed, for she glorified herself and lived in luxury. So give her a like measure of torment and mourning, since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, and am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason the plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. It's sort of like Babylon here, that everything's going great, and then destruction in one night. It's all over. It's instantaneous almost. Death and mourning in a single day. She will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment is come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, that is, human souls. Babylon trades in human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed is gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose traded on the sea stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will be no more. The sound of harpists and musicians, and flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more, and a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of his mill will be heard in you no more, and the light of the lamp will shine in you no more. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all your nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who have been slain on the earth. So that's the fall of Babylon. And this is prophecy in the book of Revelation. So I understand it to be the system of this world, basically Babylon. And at some point in time, it's coming down. Of course, Satan is the god of this world. And in the temptations in the desert, he offers to give this world to Jesus, if Jesus will bow down and worship him. And Jesus doesn't refute it. He doesn't debate that Satan has authority over this world. It was given to him by God, evidently. And that's the way things are. But one day it's all come to an end.
It's interesting to me that all the things they're weeping over are economic things. It's the economy, it's the cash. But the real currency of Babylon is the souls of men.
Wow, think about that. Could you explain a little more? I mean, I agree with you.
Well, I mean, what good is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul?
Well, there you go.
How
Yeah,
many people sell their souls, for economics?
they do.
Well,
Wow. Okay. Carmen?
So the kicker with this is to
see where we fit into all of this. You know, Isaiah's talking about these giant people groups and these giant categories of geography, just one after another, going back and forth between them.
Yeah.
And, you know, where do we fit on that map, spiritually speaking? This is where we are. We're Babylon. America is Babylon.
Oh, certainly.
And that, you know, we like to think of ourselves as Israel, and the church is Israel. So there is a new Israel, but America is a prophecy about us.
Oh, certainly. Certainly. The whole world system. Well, that's the way it is, friends. I mean, this is good news and bad news.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to go out to restaurants, eat good food, go to the movie, but I'm not going to just, sell out for it. I mean, I can do that. Okay, let's go on to verse 11. It is. 11 through 17, perhaps this deals with nations who were alive then with Babylon. And some of it's a little tough to deal with. Let's go ahead and try. 11 and 12, the oracle concerning Duma, one who is calling to me from Seir. Watchman, what time of the night? Watchman, what time of the night? I think King James says watchman, how far gone the night, or something like that. So
What of the night?
What of the night? Okay. The watchman says, morning comes, and also the night. If you will inquire, come back again. Seir, Mount Seir refers to Edom, which is, we looked at those maps last time. My mistaken notion about geography, Edom is really pretty down south, really, of Israel. South, a little bit east, but mainly south of Israel down there. And Duma is up in the Arabian Peninsula, up in modern Saudi Arabia, in the northeastern part of there. Well, there's some history we could go into and all that. Basically, I'm going to say that the descendants of Esau, that is Edom, or Seir, are asking the prophet for a word. What word? Perhaps, when will the threat from Assyria be over? Or when will the night be over? The prophet's answer, morning comes, but the night comes also. The translation, the Assyrian threat will be over, but the army of Babylon is coming. So one thing and then another. Peace breaks out, but then war, and then peace, and then war. There's time for peace and time for war, says Ecclesiastes. And it goes on, kind of in the same boring story that just continues on and on and on until Christ comes back. All right, verse 13. The oracle concerning Arabia. In the thickets of Arabia you will lodge, O caravans of the Dedanites. To the thirsty bring water. Meet the fugitive with bread, O inhabitant of the land of Tema. For they have fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, from the bent bow, and from the press of battle. For thus the Lord said to me, within a year, according to the years of a hired worker, all the glory of Kedar will come to an end, and the remainder of the archers of the mighty men of the sons of Kedar will be few. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has spoken. Let's see. Pastor Nick, if you would look up Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5. We'll just read a quick verse on that about Kedar in a second. These places, Dedan, Teman, and Kedar, are all in Arabia. Verses 13 through 15. O caravans of the Dedanites, to the thirsty bring water, meet the fugitive with bread, and so on. Well, it seems like we're dealing with refugees again, which Isaiah talks a lot about, fugitives and refugees wandering around everywhere. These are probably refugees from the Assyrian invasion again, and these Arabian cities perhaps are going out bringing bread to these people, bread, sustenance. Kedar is in the northwestern region of the Arabian Peninsula. The Jews were well acquainted with Kedar and the tents of Kedar, as in Song of Solomon chapter 1, verse 5.
I am very dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon.
Yeah. So the woman in Song of Solomon says, I'm black but beautiful, dark but lovely, like the tents of Kedar. Evidently they use those goat hair tents that were black or dark in color. So, I mean, the Jews knew all about this, about Kedar. So, in verses 16 then, thus the Lord said to me, within a year, according to the years of a hired worker, all the glory of Kedar will come to an end. I don't know the historical context here. And the remainder of the archers and the mighty men of the sons of Kedar will be few, for the Lord the God of Israel has spoken. So, like all human glory, whatever the glory of Kedar is will come to an end at some point in time, because the Lord has spoken. So that's all I have on. So I thought fairly difficult to sit here today. But I'm open to any comments you might have. That's all I have for today.
If I could go backwards a little bit.
Yes.
This little proclamation against Edom, following the fall of Babylon predicted, reflects one of my favorite Psalms, which is 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we wept when we remembered Zion.
Yeah.
It's a lament, coming out of the captivity.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, the people are wishing judgment upon Babylon.
Yeah.
But also Edom stood by and cheered as they saw the walls of Jerusalem fall.
That's true. That is true. All right, who else? Connor.
Also, going backwards a little bit, we were talking about verse 5, I think, the feast of
Belshazzar.
Belshazzar.
Yeah.
There's this thing in the pattern of every time the world ends in the Bible, they're always having a party, they're always feasting,
Yes.
right? So in the days of Noah, they were eating and drinking and marrying.
Boy.
That's right.
Here at the end of, the end of the Babylonian world,
Yeah.
they're feasting and eating, and Christ says that's how it's going to be
Wow.
at the end of time.
Days of Noah.
But then so on the one hand, maybe that's why we have fasting as a spiritual discipline, to sort of distance ourselves from the revelry and prepare ourselves for the end of the world. But then on the other hand, I was thinking about the Eucharist. And Christ says, you're doing this keeping in mind my return. So it's like a holy version of a feast at the end of the world, right? It's this.
But it's a sanctified food.
Yeah, it's a holy version of it. It's a
Yeah.
holy version of it. It's in the next chapter, we're going to talk about this next week. It specifically says that they're eating flesh and drinking wine.
Who exactly? Just the people in the world?
The world.
Okay.
The world. The end of the world in the days of Noah. That's what they're doing. They're
Okay.
eating flesh and they're drinking wine.
Okay.
So here we have a sanctified version in the Eucharist,
Wow.
and we're doing it keeping in mind, in this sort of urgent way, Christ's return.
Okay. Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone be sure to come next week. Connor's going to take over for the next 4 weeks. I'm looking forward to hearing that too. Anybody else?
Well, I guess it's, I don't remember which prophet this is in. I think my guess is Jeremiah. But he reminds Babylon that, I'm using you to discipline my people, but don't think you're going to get away with it. Your day is coming. And here you have it. We've been reading about it all morning.
Yeah. All right.
I was thinking about another thing. You enjoy going to a restaurant, you said.
Yeah, I do.
You enjoy things in life, chocolate candy or whatever it may be.
I wouldn't mind.
And reading that destruction of Babylon, they're missing everything. Their love was for the things of the world. They loved everything, their drinking, their everything. But I was reminded of what John says, love not the world, neither the things of the world. If a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And if a man loved the world, the love of the Father is not He that's friends of the world is the enemy of God, the Bible tells us. So there's a balance. God provides food for us, restaurants, different things, but there's a lot of things out here we're to be separated from and commit ourselves to the Lord, to do the Lord's will. So it's just that world thing, as Craig says, Babylon.
Yes,
Times
yeah,
up.
sure.
Yeah. Difficult to live in Babylon when you want to be in heaven.
Just hang on for a while.
Just hang on for a while.
Okay, thank you for your attention.